Okay. So I'm going to speak to things that we're thinking about. One thing we hoped for here, and I don't know how to go, is to get some inputs or anyone who's, here's an area that we're looking for some work to be done. And maybe nobody has an answer, but still there could be a desire. Or someone who's, hey, we're already doing something, who's not told anyone about it. Good time to bring it up. So I think I only have a slide or two. Let's see what I got here. Yeah, okay, here's what I have here. So what I had here was there's two areas that we kind of thought about as makes sense outside products to push into this CJ Open Rack space. One is management. We basically were hands off. We said you have server node should have a VNC and you should plug some stuff to it. That's all we said. We have some more thoughts on that, and I have the slides behind here, and I'm happy to walk through, like I said, a reprise of those. They've been presented. It's all publicly posted. The 7 of you that might have attended that session know about it, but I'm pretty sure if I didn't answer, let me answer. Who attended that management session at the summit in Santa Clara? Okay, so to my point, 0. So I can talk about some of those, but we have some ideas there, and Radisys is happy to drive some contributions. We have to be careful because we don't want to say this is what we've done. It's kind of what would be useful in general. And then the other piece is around the rack itself. Yeah.
So this is really a question to the entire group. Is there, just curious, is there anyone that is actively working on working with OpenBMC today, trying to open up their firmware?
Okay.
Is there any interest in having an open source BMC firmware?
Yes.
Okay. What's that?
For which components?
All.
Yeah, but at least for the servers. Anything with a compute element with BMC.
Right.
Are you thinking, Bill, that something like that? So it's happening. I mean, there are projects, right?
Yeah. So
How do they get touched? How do they
there's we have an open BMC GitHub, right? There's a lot of development that's going on. Unfortunately, it's not perfect. We have 2 source trees that are incompatible. Trying to address that, okay? But regardless of that, there is certainly widespread interest and adoption of OpenBMC from OCP. And not just in OCP, but the Linaro community is embracing it. There's other communities out there that are looking at us to drive that across the hardware. We have an interesting option with this rack architecture is that you now have a physical interconnection, defined interconnection to what could be a top of rack switch or somewhere else, right? And so you have the opportunity to have much more granularity of control and management between the sled and your rack management.
And that's a nice segue. I'll show I don't have time to go into all these other slides because it was its own session. But there's a little bit of saying, what do you do at the rack level? But fundamental plumbing, and a lot of this we also kept in terms of guidelines. But yeah, I mean, you've got server elements, or it could be storage, just anything with a known element. The plumbing basically in parallel, again through that back rear optical interconnect to a management switch. And so it's very straightforward. The nodes can be directly managed, or you can have an interposer, if you will. You can have something that says, because we see both of these, that says, I want a rack level framework that is collecting up, and proxying or acting as, like I said, in a version of something sitting at the rack level that subtends the BMCs below it, which ideally should all be open, but still aggregates that into some things. Or you're directly managing that completely outside the rack, and you're just seeing the nodes with the BMC implementation, and ideally it's open. So both of those are possible. Okay. So it sounds like there's interest, in that area, and I think there's a number of vectors. This is a tricky one. So again, I think tread lightly and don't try to do too much is the way to go. And then the Open BFC project too, it really doesn't even have to be, I mean, that would transcend even OCP in the sense that people could adopt that and use that, frankly, outside of OCP altogether, right? That piece can have a life of its own.
Yes, yeah.
The other thing is the rack, and I don't have a whole lot here to talk about other than, again, maybe we just keep it very, very undefined. But you'll see in the products already, you know, we've got little racks, we've got big racks. You know, there's a lot of different needs, especially for some of these edge applications. You know, things can get smaller. Certainly in your standard high-scale data centers, you're in the full meal deal, and you're putting a lot of them in there. But I think there's room to talk about the racks, and actually, to some extent, I think people think it's more defined than it is. Bill, we've talked about it, the depths and so forth. And I think some of these different dimensions, width and depth, can be not standardized, but can be put into a framework spec that defines a couple of flavors, and then we all try to stick it to those flavors. Right now, what we've productized are 800 millimeter wide at the frame level with a 19-inch rack inside, and then 1,000 millimeters deep, and then there's one that gets a little bit narrower, 600 millimeters wide, but does allow it to go a little bit deeper there. So you can squish it different ways. But inside, it's all pretty spec. Why don't I flash, because I don't want to take too much time on this, because I think we have some more interesting stuff. There's a lot of detail here, and people can look at this. But the idea that we've taken to kind of to the rack level management is to be pretty lean and mean. And the customers that we've been dealing with so far, that's what they want. They have an idea of what they want to do. They don't want a whole lot of layers in there. So this is not trying to be a network element, right, with its own thick layer of management. It does not manage the payload. It does not manage, you know, the functions. This is, you know, whatever management you bring at kind of this rack infrastructure level is really just about power, inventory, presence. That's about it. Now, the other dimension is to bring those kind of elements in the rack, expose them as kind of primitives. And we'll talk about, actually, we did talk about there, and this is, we're not binding it together, but we've seen some goodness in the, Bill, you know this well from your past, from the Intel rack scale architecture. That's something that certainly can fit here very well, can fit in other architectures as well. And that's something that we've done to bring that in at kind of a rack level to expose, you know, what's inside the rack. And I think it does make sense to outline that as one of the options if it's nicely here, you know, as sort of a rack level view of the resources. I can mention the way that we've done that is there are things that can run down in nodes and then things that aggregate them together. We actually, in first generation, the nodes didn't really have the right resources to run any agents. So we just left that alone and just kept it with IPMI and ran a proxy. Okay, so that's just an architecture. There's just one other picture that I thought might be useful here. So this talks, sorry, that's what I just spoke to actually. That talks about the rack scale design. I'm not going to go into that in detail, but that's an interesting architecture that we like and we're hearing around the industry. But again, I don't feel it's appropriate to hard bind that into the carrier grade open rack. So I don't think you should say, okay, if I'm going to build this, I have to bring this management infrastructure. But it does make sense. I think it should be outlined as an option. This, and I think this is something that we think it's worth contributing. It's just a very simple way to do inventory, and again, I'm not going to go into the details, but there are no special buses. There's no way to identify what's in what slot. And you know, if you look at traditional systems, you've got those kinds of things. So you need a scheme, you know, to have a little bit of, you know, how do I manage inventory? How do I know what's where, what's connected to what? If I have this, you know, interconnect. Well, part of it's by design. You know how you're going to tell, but you need some way to validate and check that. So there's some heuristic algorithms that we apply with just a few little hooks that are fairly simple. And this is something that we expect to contribute because it seems worthwhile to share. Again, keeping it very simple. I'm trying to see, this might be the one to speak to. Actually, I was going to go to this. So this is something that we think is worthwhile to bring into, into a general spec, which is, so I think it's very important that things be manageable at the node level because that's the way web scale computing certainly works today. It's very, very lean. The rack is barely even there. It's just something to hold nodes. However, when you come to telco side of things, there still is a heritage of thinking about systems. And to some extent, and I'm going to quote my old colleague Chuck here, the rack is the system, right? So this rack, is doing some things that were done previously by purpose-built network elements. So as such, sometimes you want that rack to be an entity, to have some capabilities. And so you can roll some things up there. So we do think there is an appropriate place for something like an agent, we'll call it a rack management agent, to live in the rack and have manageability of the rack. And again, to host those functions that are going to give you, some of the resource APIs, the inventory capabilities, being able to monitor power, just a way to get at those things. But it's important, I feel strongly about this, that you don't make that the only way in. It's a way, but sometimes you want to bypass that. I've come from a background and did some work in making ATCA to find a fairly heavy shelf manager kind of construct, and I just think that's not, the industry doesn't want that, it's too heavy. We're not trying to replicate that. But there's some goodness there. There's some things that you want to do, as a system. So that's the idea behind a rack agent. So I think what we're looking at is, what is kind of that minimal set of stuff that we can put in there and define. And really the focus is, it's on the things that you're not going to get otherwise. So if you can see every node, that's great. But you have other things. You do have power supplies. You have PDUs, and you want to know, you want to know something about those. You want to know if they're good. You want to be able to turn them on and off. So there's some things to manage there, and that's the kind of stuff that belongs in the rack agent, I think. Okay. This is a little bit about our implementation, but again, going back to the open BMC, we're hearing a lot. Redfish in the BMC is something that is popping up as being important. It's just a really better API than IPMI, more flexible. If that can become kind of a standard, it's not yet in the sense that every off-the-shelf motherboard doesn't necessarily have this capability. But that's something that we're seeing, push that down to the nodes and have it at an aggregate rack level. So I kind of mentioned this before. What we've done is if you don't have those Redfish capabilities down in the node, well then you can proxy, and that's something else that can live at the rack agent, right? So you can come into the rack and say, like as some manager says, I speak Redfish, I understand the Redfish constructs, I want to know some things about servers, but my server doesn't do that, the rack agent will be that mitigation.
So,
it's hard for the big room because you never know what level of depth people are in.
So, how important is Redfish? And what does it really, what does it really do? And is this just another IPMI 3.0 spec written with XML?
I'll give my opinion, which may not be, not perfect, and I'd love to hear from others. I think to some extent, yes, it's a spec that is sort of modernizing IPMI, okay, and it's a lot, maybe in some ways easier to use. I think the other thing is it's built for hierarchy, so you can do some of the things that I talked about, which is you can operate at a couple different levels with it. So those are some of the things I see. Whether it's, what is the driver? I guess the question is, should this be a unifying thing? Should it be a mandate? Because it comes with a little bit of extra weight, I believe. So to say, I'm going to implement that, you're carrying some extra baggage there, and it's not worthwhile. I'm not convinced that it should be a mandate that you say, look, every single node needs to have this. I think you should have some nodes that don't have a BMC. We said it should be there in every compute node, but you may have some things that don't require, it's simple, right? Keep it cheap. So I don't want things to be overbuilt. But you got to align it on something, and this seems to have a lot of momentum. So as much as anything, I like the momentum behind it. I don't know. Do you have an opinion or others?
Yeah, please. Well, I'm still, so I can talk loud.
Okay, I get it.
I think we're still looking at Redfish, and like some of the aspects, if you think about where we're coming from, we just spent a couple of years telling legacy network element manufacturers and vendors that we want NCOM, and it's sort of model and it's sort of in the same family or genus or whatever you want to call it, as more so like Redfish than it is like first gen IPMI. And so it's still kind of open, but there's been a number of folks who said you should be interested in this. This would be much easier for us to integrate into our existing operations and our now static for managing things. And so I don't know all the answers, but there's a lot of interest in figuring out how Redfish could make our operations simple.
And it's interesting you mentioned NetConf, because I agree. With all these kinds of things, you get to an area where you say, well, I could certainly represent a model in Yang and do those things in NetConf, or I could do, So I think I don't see either one as a universal interface, and there's others. You get OpenFlow in there. There's a lot of things where you say, I could do this or I could do it that way. So I've been around this enough. I have I would be shocked if there's any convergence on universal interface, in this space. As long as it serves something useful, I see them as somewhat complementary. But in particular, kind of where I see it is taking some of the things that tend to be at a bit lower level, some of the basic kind of operational things, and exposing them. It looks really good for that. And that's something that maybe to some degree, a lot of those things were in proprietary management systems. At least if you think Telco, right? You'd buy a box and it would do a bunch of stuff. And that part of it would be pretty specialized. You'd have a couple, like S&P bibs and things that would define some of that. So Redfish may, especially if you start to break that apart, you say, okay, now my higher level management is going to care a little bit about compute elements and some of the more basic resources, as opposed to just saying, I'm just seeing a chunk of an element, like a whole, whatever, BNG or something. I'm now seeing pieces of it. Then you start to compare, you start to care about, memory and power and some of those more primitive things. And Redfish is a way to see some of the more primitive resources. That's kind of how I see it, and I see them fitting together. I don't think we have any ability to dictate anything, so we think it's all of the above.
So in my 20 plus years of trying to get the telcos to go out into the commercial market and buy open systems, management has been the single biggest barrier to entry of people's equipment. It's why the Lucents of the world have managed to survive, because they have the magic formula of how to take a box, turn it into an AT&T managed box, and plug it into their network. And until we break that model down, Cox equipment has always been have that barrier of entry. Even in the enterprise market, almost every piece of equipment we sell uses IPMI, and it's had some degree of OEM command customization. And that's always a big, again, barrier and complexity that we have to break down to try and sell equipment. So I see management as the single biggest issue surrounding Cox equipment and open networks.
I agree with that, and I think the two just premises that I'm going to keep relying on to kind of move forward. One is the less perfect you try to make a solution, the more chance you have of actually getting something done. So bite off a couple things. And all you do is come up with a way that we're all going to see power. Okay, that's one thing. The second thing is kind of back to where is leverage, right? I've done reinventing stuff. A lot of the stuff has been around the block. So whether something is the perfect instrument, I don't know. But if it's there and it has a little bit of momentum, try to take it as far as it goes. So those are the two things I think should come into our thinking in terms of where we go next year. But it's hard.
I don't know if Redfish is the answer, but it's certainly a step in the correct direction away from IPMI. Yes. So, IPMI was invented to be a motherboard management spec about 15 odd years ago.
It was also
right. So
it was also envisioned to be embedded, and that's the biggest thing. So curious about it. The other thing interesting. The cool thing about interfaces is if you say this is it, we're literally doing that right now because of that exact thing. So if people are like, yeah, I want to use Redfish, we don't even have it. Rev 0, we'll proxy, right? We can interwork stuff, and that's half of our lives. Is more interfaces, is more jobs to.
You brought up a point. You can use Redfish for primitives, but you can also use an agent to do cycle and information. So, by the way, I completely endorse your statement that we ended up with IPMI, and there's OEM versions of that. I tell you, I'm scared death that Redfish is leading us down that path faster than ever. Because when you look at the Redfish interface, there's more variables, and there's more opportunity to customize it and create yet a completely incompatible solution. So, you know, I'm not a fan of it. In fact, it's the opposite.
Fair enough. And maybe a good challenge there is to say, can you take it and constrain it and say, you know,
Exactly, yeah.
it's going to do this, this, and this, and not, like I said, not overbake it.
We spent 15 years in the industry trying to get my work right, and we just threw it out. We're going to go down, and my concern is, are we going to go down the path we spend the next 15 years trying to get redfish? And at the end, what we've done is enabled a few people that have significant investment in that interface, create proprietary management or orchestration solution that works with that.
All right, go ahead.
So, when we looked at trying to do asset management and power management, I can't say I've been to a lot of AT&T sites throughout the states, and we found that a lot of the data centers weren't very, they had hodgepodge of equipment. And to your point, the vendors have different IPMI. So, a lot of the facility manager guys, they basically opt for smarter outlet level control tools to kind of, utilize it as part of their asset management, power monitoring and control type stuff. So it's just an input that's what I've kind of seen. It redfish is going down the same path where you've got, hodgepodge of stuff and customizing stuff. It's not going to be successful.
I want to kind of represent the opposite side. I think that there are places both in IPMI and as well where when you're innovating in the platform, there are things that you need to control and manage that are not within the scope of the existing feature set, right? And that's why there's OEM specific commands, not to do the standard things a different way, but to do things that are not in the scope of the specifications already. If we try and block that kind of innovation and evolution, I think we're really missing it. So I think what we need is some method where we encourage people to do standard things to try and fit into the standard framework, but we need to have a place where evolution and innovation can happen. And that's a really tricky line to walk. Okay, that's
I'm not an IPMI expert, but is there any cons to the in-band and out-of-band sessions?
So that's another aspect, so separate from the sort of management models and protocols. So I kind of agree with everything that's said. By the way, that's why it's hard to make if you want to lead contributions, how far do you go? But again, I'll stick on two premises, which is keep it minimal and leverage. In-band, out-of-band, we had a lot of discussions on that, and even in the architecture. So we tried to, again, keep it kind of open because people have preferences. In this architecture itself, we originally were huge, and I was a big champion of in-band because it's just so pretty, right? You just one cable, everything's in there. We just found that, practically speaking, people do like to see stuff out of band, and we just see too much of it. So in fact, we went the other way in our first instantiation to what Bill's kind of moved to. So you really have a separate path, into the management entity of every node. And so if we look at a typical rack configuration, and I'll show some of the deployments. There is a switch for the management plane entirely. And we actually plummet optical to gigabit, but it's there, it's out of band. It keeps things pretty simple. So, but it's not, you could certainly overload your data plan.
It's religious for some people.
Yes, exactly. And we just decided we're going to win that war one way or the other, and so we better put the option in there. Now someone says, great, I don't need all those different switching planes. Let me, well, let me carve things out. We use VLANs. There's a lot of ways to do stuff, but people operationally get often uncomfortable.
And it's a subset of out of band.
Yeah,
and out of band is with some people table stakes. So
yeah.
You have to start there and go back the other way.
I will say one thing, and just came back to the architecture that we did think about, which I'll call it a little bit of a, like you get one in-band type of thing while keeping it out-of-band. first we thought, okay, to bring an out-of-band management connection, it's going to have to stick out and look like this different thing. And we said, let's keep it. It's literally separate. Like you have a server, you have a connection there. We make sure that that's an optical connection, and we plug it into the same bundle of optics in the back. Now, again, you don't have to do this with the standard, but it is defined. You got that ferrule of, pile of optics. I think it's like 96. So there's plenty of room to put all sorts of stuff, and it gets its own thing. So it is out of band from a logical point of view, but from a physical point of view, it still looks clean. You still from a physical bundle. So it's a little bit of maybe just like a visualization, I guess, a tidiness. Okay, that's good discussion. So I think just one thing I get from this is I think there's interest, and I think that maybe there's concurrent that we should take a focus on management and come up with what are those couple of things where you can kind of hang your hat on. And it's not going to be easy because I think there's a lot of things. So kind of finding that, how do you fly low enough and just catch those things that matter without going too far? Because I think once you over-rotate and go too far, you lose people. So because we want adoption. Yeah, okay. Oh, sorry, we wanted to do a roundtable one. Okay, we were doing a little bit of a roundtable, so let me just get off of that. But in that last section, where else should we go? So I've suggested these areas of the rack, physical, some interesting things.